So hello from Thailand, Koh Samui, Samahita retreat. Unfortunately, still empty. All this still going on. No one able to come here. But hopefully soon that changes. But in the meantime, we're connected digitally across the globe. So, before we get into any practice, some thoughts, question, reflection to ask oneself. How tuned in to your own body are you? How aware? There's the awareness, and then do you actually listen and respond to that, pay attention? Now, in one sense, all that can be turned under interoception, okay, the ability to interoception has its own function, is a feedback from within the body, especially in terms of the organs, to the brain, and then you're picking up inner senses, on basically how the body is functioning and how it responding to different situations. It could be internal, meaning like stress, fatigue in the body, or what's picked up from outside and processed in the body. And of course that'll have an emotional interaction and other processes that go on. So within that, of course, there's different elements to it. So then if you can pick up the information interoceptively, what do you do with it? Exactly. Do you listen to it, or do you follow your own sort of preconditioned way of thinking? So, as an example, your body is sensing the pressure load it's been dealing with, right? And it has to regulate numerous systems within. And of course, a lot of that will come back to activity centrally in the brain, and how that, of course, is even going to get processed, for example, especially through hypothalamus, pituitary. So a lot of the regulation of neuroendocrine is going to happen from there. And that's going to balance where your stress level is at, how the reproductive hormones, because they all pulsate, so the cycle of that, growth hormone, as well as thyroid, okay? And of course, many people at some stage start to suffer from thyroid issues, which if it's low or too high, hypo or hyper, has a big impact on your overall health and well-being. And the thing is, you can throw it off. Now, the information is there, so that's what I'm talking about with interoception. The information is there. It's coming to you, but often we don't listen, which happens in relationships, right? We don't listen, we don't pay proper attention. We kind of wish for some other situation, or we think, because we're generally egotistical beings, we think we have a better solution. So as a simple example, my body is sending a message that you've kind of pushed a bit too much. And so what you need is rest. Therefore, you need to remove the pressure from the nervous system, from the entire neuroendocrine process, really. You've got to remove that pressure, which is the removal of fatigue, and therefore rest, allow the system to recover, and then get up and get back into whatever it is that has to be done. However, we will often get that message, not hear it, listen to it properly, interpret it in a way that I want to interpret it, like, oh, I should just work out more, or I need to go out and do some other activity. And so then, of course, your free will allows you to go and do that, but something pays the price along the way. And eventually, that builds up, and it leads to a imbalance, because the system's dealing just with too much, and you haven't given it the space or the break. And like one time here, one time there is inconsistent. If it becomes chronic, it won't solve it. right? And unfortunately, when it becomes chronic, even the kind of feedback information becomes dulled. And that's where people slip into a difficult situation. It's chronic. I'm not even getting the right information back to me. It's kind of dulled. It's only partially coming back. I don't really know how to handle it, how to deal with this. So this is why I get back to within part of your practice needs to be this attention to what's going on inside. Listen to it. And we're not fragile beings. We are resilient. Okay, we can handle all these ups and downs and what's going on. Okay, but there's a range. Actually, they call that allostatic load. You know, there's a range, and it has a cost. And therefore, I need to do things to support or buffer that cost. But if I don't listen to it interoceptively, pay attention, pick it up. If I don't listen to it, then that cost becomes a bigger debt. And then I'm wondering, I'm ending up at the doctor because I don't feel great, and they do my bloods, and certain hormones are out of balance, or they're not being produced properly, and that's this whole cycle that I've just described that goes on. Now, all I have to do is go back, trace it back a number of steps, just like they do currently. Oh, somebody's got infected with COVID, therefore trace it back. Where were the points of contacts? Who else could it be? And you try to mitigate it that way, at least the spread from there. So in a similar way, it's like trace it back. I can at least learn retrospectively. I can learn from this, right? Okay, where did I go off kilter, right? Lose the center, balance. I had a great idea in my head and I pushed for it. But really, what I needed to do was, okay, pay attention, listen. And I would say like a physical yoga practice, especially when back in the days when I was teaching those full Ashtanga sequences, it evolved into, for me and for the teaching, of you really, it's not about do the next pose, jump, do the next pose, jump. That's just some sort of physical routine. It can have its benefits, but so do other physical routines. So this would be, okay, I do the pose, I'm high in energy, right, and it's not taxing on my nervous system, then I can do whatever transition and do the next pose. However, maybe at a certain point, after this next pose, my energy is compromised a bit, meaning I feel the weight. That's called fatigue, right? It's like, to go on and do another move to get to another pose is a bit of a heavy burden. So if you're climbing Mount Everest, or if you're fleeing, in the night with your children across a desert or something, okay, that's what you have to do. You're saving your life, or you're climbing a mountain at high altitude, and therefore you're going to push and tax your system to that degree. Okay? Ideally, the mountain climbers train for it. But in this case, that's not what it's about, especially yoga practice and physically, generally most of us are in healthy, contained, hopefully safe, environments, right? And where there's maybe more boredom or less excitement, whatever's going on. So the question is, how do you manage yourself? And it's not about push, no pain, no gain, because everything has a cost, everything has a price. And regardless of even just the physiological price, which I've just described, as that wears and tears on your system, and it goes in a loop, eventually leading to a chronic state. Regardless of that, the other price is I didn't get the opportunity out of tuning in, paying attention, and responding, which is actually where the real yoga works. Okay, that's the heart of the meditative process, and you can call it all these other names and all these other kind of techniques of meditation, which is all they really come down to, under whatever dogma, philosophy, doctrine. Okay, but they're down to particular techniques, and they all require, which Yoga practice is part of that. Paying attention, listening. So if I'm doing a seated practice, regardless now of the physically active asana practice, but it's the same principle, even if I'm doing a seated one and with the breath, and there's a bit of a weight. It's not push on through and I'll get better by doing more. It's like, okay, maybe I need to lay down, right? And of course, it's a fine line. And a certain personality will lay down and not get up, and another personality would be anathema to lay down. So this is about training the fine line, okay? If in doubt, lay down and observe the body. You maybe only need to lay down in 20 seconds, balance things, and then you're back up, okay? If you lay down and there's no desire to get up, etc., okay, then you're not listening to the body. You're just slipping into the least resisted path, okay? So I hope all this is making sense. There's no fast and easy solution. It comes down to, are you paying attention? There's interoceptive information coming back. Are you listening to it? Okay, do you respond to it? Or does this other part of your psyche take over and respond with preconditioned behaviors and ways, and what other people say, like, push on through, no, you don't lay down, that's wrong for you, etc., etc. Now, of course, you could feel that kind of weight and fatigue and do like 3 handstands and boom, the effervescence of that, and you're suddenly like, oh, but I'm better anyway. And yes, again, it's temporary. The cost of that fatigue hasn't gone away, okay, even though you can kind of give it a bit of a shake-up. So I would still lay down, even if it was 30 seconds, 1 minute, get back up, and even then add in something like the handstands or whatever, and get the kind of effervescence, the kind of lift, okay? But it's a careful reading along the way of when I need rest, hearing that, listening to it and hearing it and responding to it, giving it, and then back up. And you can apply this throughout the day. If I'm not engaged in this activity, which lately I'm not, because there's nobody here, but if not involved in the sort of people interaction stuff, then it's a lot in front of the computer with heavy mental work. And that uses up a lot of energy, and it has its own taxing aspects. And therefore, it's like, okay, the eyes will get tired, or luckily the posture is okay after all this practice, but still it's like, okay, you just need to lay down. And then lay down, listening to and feeling out the body and the state of the eyes. And sometimes it's 1 minute, sometimes it's like 10 or 15 minutes. But the aim is to be well-paced, stay in balance. There's a lot going on for us in life. There's a lot we have to deal with. Current changes and situations, bills and other things, family stuff, people pressures. And some things will pressure more than others. So what is part of my support system? Hopefully this practice stuff. Do I read the messages? One of the simplest elements that is part of good practice, you can insert it any time throughout the day, which is lay down. Yeah, sometimes more rest than activity workout is not sometimes, but generally is beneficial, highly beneficial, okay? Because if you don't listen to it, the system goes into a chronic dull state. The immune system also goes out of whack, so your health is compromised. You can't manage a kind of a weight balance. So, ironically, I'm pushing, working out, hoping to be fitter or tighter or leaner and so on, yet I'm undoing that process by pushing more. And so the heart of yoga practice, whether it's bodily asana to these sitting ones, to just pure mental pain, inner retention and working with that, is this same quality of listen carefully, listen deeply, pay attention to that. So along with the different yogis over the years, I've also been quite enamored and inspired by these forest, the tradition of forest monks, like Thai Buddhist forest monks, because they were real practitioners, a la, kind of a yogi alone practicing. Very different than the typical, Buddhist monk in neighborhood monasteries, etc. So these were removed and into practice. And so one of the great masters, that Ajahn Chah, he said, look, I don't know, I went to a few masters and I listened to them, and that's all I did. I listened, and then I applied that and practiced it myself. And not much hand-holding, not much, daily guidance, etc. It was just the ability to listen. So that was the only advice he said he could give. He says, I don't know anything else to tell you. That's all I did to practice and then teach. I really listened. So really listening is not just maybe listening to me today or listening to another source of good advice or wisdom, but also really listening to what's been coming up inside. I mean, it's a great cliched line of I listen to my body, but most people are not listening to their body, they're listening to their own sort of distorted mental interpretation of that, which usually is to satisfy some urge, some sort of base emotion, etc. So listening has almost no commentary to it. Listening is fully aware and present. It's a almost clear mind. And that's what you pick up from inside, or you pick up having auditorily heard it from another. And maybe you'll even hear other messages from the other teacher source, which is beyond this physical. Okay? But that's not a topic for me to talk about today. So, let's do a certain amount of practice for the next 10-15 minutes, and let's apply that paying attention, listening. Okay? Now, do you even hear that? Do you hear it and there's commentary in your brain? Or do you hear it and you just continue to hear it? This is one of these reasons why some of these items that make harmonious sound are introduced into the realm of practice. So sometimes, especially at nighttime, I like to sit there quietly, and I'd have the little mallet in my fingers, arm resting on the knee, and with an absolute minimal amount of movement, I just let it make the sound, and I mentally, as empty as possible, follow the trail of that sound. Now, I don't know how that translates here on the video. Maybe you're following this sound, having to hear my voice, but also hear the wind. So what we'll do is, I'll do 3 of those, and you just follow the trajectory of sound, ideally with minimal to zero commentary in your own mind, brain. Now you apply the same directed attention, the art of awareness, minimally to zeroly, devoid anyway of commentary. It's like taking a big light and directing it, and you just see and hear. I took a look in the body. Maybe you can come into the heart area and you look and assess, see, become aware of your posture. There's a pinch where the leg intersects with the pelvis. Can you slowly, carefully make a little bit of space? Is it a bit of an effort, and you feel that effort along your spine to sit up? Or do you notice yourself collapsed, where the heart is heavy? How do you find the balanced place? Part of it will be training, as you continue a training asana practice. It pays off so that when you sit here, you can sit here freer without the nervous burden that makes itself known, one part via fatigue. Can you read or see that? If you find yourself sitting and it's just too heavy, too much in the brain, then one approach by some people is push on through. The other approach is rest for a minute or two or three, then come back. So if you're able to, it's not that you just do a body scan, okay? I'm actually asking you to be more in the center of the body and pay attention. What do you pick up? Are the shoulders relaxed, hanging down? Do they feel extra heavy? Or they collapse your chest and heart? Or do you have enough support without stress that can come from the navel and just below, see? Now maybe you're feeling okay, this is working. But if you stay sitting here for another half hour to an hour, will this collapse? Will this break down? Does the weight of sitting still show its cost on the current state of your system and its ability to support? Do you give up because the mind gets bored and distracted, or is it really because now the body needs a break? So even if you do change posture, position, mentally you stay tuned in. So at one point you're watching the body as it's in a sitting position like this. Maybe that's applied to other techniques involving the breath, etc. And then if you turn to lay down, you are also watching the body relax. I mean, what a privilege to be able to be in a position where you can watch this, what we call a human anatomical body, made up of bones and tissue, etc. And you can watch that release. In other words, you reduce the electromagnetic burden, in a sense, okay? So that's why you'll feel that release. Now you might be able to achieve that release while you're sitting here. And when it becomes too much sitting, then you switch it to laying. If you can tune in and develop that here, then you can apply it, different work functions and so on throughout the day. Now can you tune into your breath? Do you feel the breath through the nose, or is the mouth partially involved? Can you just feel the breath through the nose? When you sit this calm and still, the breath is actually minimal. I'm not going to call that shallow, I'd call it light. Very light, because it's not deep, meaning the diaphragm moves minimally, and that's reflected in a minor movement of the navel. So when the breath is light, you won't really see the chest, ribs, or much of the upper abdomen move. Instead, you'll just see minor movement around the navel. That's very different than when we go into a more controlled breathing, where we put a little bit of support below the navel, and then get the full activity of upper abdomen, side ribs, chest working. That's in a controlled, active breath. Now you have the passive, light, I am watching it, listening breath. And it happens on a posture that's able to support it. When that is not possible, it will affect the mental state. Meaning the posture might collapse and the breath becomes irregular, therefore the mind is going to be disturbed, agitated. Therefore, if I'm listening or aware of that, if I can't correct it that moment with posture and breath, then the right thing to do would be lay down. Allow balance to come back, fatigue to remove, the brain to have a break, and then you can come back to sitting. And if you do that, then you're in the yoga. It's the meditative process. It's not that, oh, I sat here for 20 minutes and I made it. That is a dumb, crude approach to practice. It's quite common, but actually, it'll get you to step one and then you kind of slip back again. So instead, I refine in a very subtle way. It's really on you. Can you tune in and pay attention? So it's not just enough to be good and really get it done, which, I applaud, but if your question to me, which I often get, is, well, how does this work? How do I go deeper? Where does this go after so many years? Well, I'm telling you right now, the only way is to slip through the pores, go beyond the cracks, slip into the subtle, find the nuance, you're actually doing is you're taking the course, the flow of mind, and you're fine-tune channeling it, because it's an energy actually, right? It's an electromagnetic force. You're fine-tuned, without taxing it, in this very peaceful, harmonious state. You're fine-tuning it. When there's commentary and a bunch of other thoughts, then you maybe agitate, but at the very least you disperse that energy. So you channel it in. Now if I can do that in a very subtle way, then I take the same quality and I apply it if I'm doing Kapalabhati, if I'm holding my breath, I'm doing certain asanas. If you're doing certain asanas, you can pay attention to all pieces of the body, where the feet are, the hands are, what happens at the center, how you rotate certain joints, what's going on with the limbs, and in that sense you can actually avoid pain and injury. You can develop the asana, and then it supports you sitting here. It improves your breath, and then you work on the breath, and things get more charged, more powerful. And you take that fine-tuned mental state, increased awareness, which is hard to even measure, but you start to notice it, and it takes a few years, and then you take it in to these subtle levels. Now the danger in the subtle level is it's easy to go, and that's not necessarily absorbed, as it's zoned out. Sort of like stuck in a corner. So at the very least, pay more attention and listen. And listen to what's being said and follow that, respond. It's not that we know things, it's that we have the capacity to pay better attention, tune in, and respond in what is hopefully the best way, optimal way, which isn't perfect world balance, world peace. It's like the difficult situation I'm facing and how I tune in and respond. Non-harm, total truth. So follow the sound of the singing bowl without commentary and continue going in.